What's up, guys? Frank Macaluso here from Garageaholic. Welcome to another episode of the E36 N54 engine swap. We are taking the N54 engine out today. We'll be inspecting the engine bay, and we'll be getting ready for paint. Stand by. Alright, so now we need to take this engine out of here. It'll be really easy since everything is basically installed. We're just going to need to remove it one thing at a time. But we're going to remove everything and then the engine's just going to come sliding right out. Alright, it's going to make it really easy. It's just going to slide right out. So yeah, anyway, that's what we're really doing today. We want to get this engine bay prepared. We want to get the engine fixed. We got some wiring here that we need to inspect. We got a clutch we got to replace. We got some idler pulleys, O2 sensors, clutch stuff. We got CAS and key and start button stuff. We have turbo wastegate rattle stuff here. We got some, this is for the shifter. This actually should belong over here, the clutch. So we got a lot we got to do in this episode today, and we will be doing it all, and I'll be showing you how I do all these stock fixes before we put the engine back in a following episode. Okay guys, before we get started, I really did want to talk a little bit about wiring at the high level before we really get into the details. When we reinstall the engine, do the final assembly, start terminating wires for pedal, for the cluster, for everything else in the car. High level here, we got our starter cable right here. We have all the other wiring from the engine that's going to end up going and living into this little cubby. The little cubby is going to be where the ECU installs, or DME. This guy is the door. It'll end up covering that up right there perfectly with a little access hole for all the wiring. So there really is no need for lengthening or shortening of any wires. And this guy here is going to end up going, it kind of snakes over the engine a little bit. It's the way it was stock, so that's why we're going to leave it here. I'm not going to end up terminating or cutting any high gauge wire. But this guy's basically just going to end up getting installed right here underneath the cowling for the air intake for the HVAC. So this is going to be a pretty easy install as well. I'm going to get that all set up as well after we get the engine out. So we will be taking the engine out, we'll be preparing the engine bay, and we'll be preparing the engine as well. So let's take a look at the interior. Alright, so this is basically the stock E30 M30 interior. I did clean and prepare a lot of this. I did take the center console out. We're going to end up cleaning all this up and vacuuming it all up. I got all the other parts back in the trunk. I'll show you in the trunk, but everything is basically here and accounted for. And we're going to be replacing the steering with a sportier version, probably a tri-spoke steering wheel. We get the A-arm pillars. We got this cowling for the up here, and we're probably going to replace the seats. So we do need to do a little bit of work in here. This is the shifter again. Everything works, but we do need to disconnect that before we remove the engine. There is some aftermarket wiring that's been done. We got to rip that out and get everything back to as stock configuration as possible because we really want this car to be a really nice sleeper. So that's kind of the angle that we're going to go at here. All right. Okay, finally, I did organize all the interior pieces in the trunk here. This is going to be a dark wood dash, like a trim package on this M3. All the interior pieces are accounted for, and we will be installing all that during final assembly later on after all the wiring is done. But basically, everything seems to be accounted for in here. These are the A-arms. So that's basically where we're going to go. We do need to put some of this stuff on as well on the body, and then these are all the other parts that are left over from the stock E36 M3. So we got to figure out what we're going to do with all these pieces as well. So that's next. Well, that's not next. I mean, that's not going to happen. This is not going to be installed. That's kind of what I'm saying. Guys, I'm doing a time lapse of everything I need to remove. You want to know the specifics? Just go back in the video history and look at everything that I did to install.
Whoa, 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 yeah, we are in the place of
right, now it's time to take that engine, lift it up, and gently out of its existing position so that we may fix it. I don't know why I had to be so dramatic and theatrical there, but that's what I need to do, so either watch or don't watch. All right, now that I got the engine basically sitting here on its own weight, I want to do some of these fixes while the engine's out. And we got a couple things to work on first. And the first thing, that's my kid. I probably won't be able to do this for very long. Is the clutch disc, throwout bearing, and the release fork. We're replacing all three of those things in here. So we need to take the transmission off, we need to replace the clutch disc, and then we'll just basically put it back on, then we'll put the slave cylinder back on with the line and make sure that everything lines up there. All right, so we opened up the transmission and we got the existing fork and the throwout bearing there. And you just remove it by removing the clip, and the whole thing just kind of pulls right out, just like that. And we're just gonna put the new one in just like this. Done. No, I'm just kidding. But this guy actually ends up going, what happens is this is like a raised dimple, and it's supposed to go onto the pivot point. That's the pivot fork. And it goes in here in this clip. This clip kind of secures all that in place. Let's see if I can do it with one hand. There we go. I did it. All right, so now I can throw the throwout bearing on there, which kind of goes like that. And it also kind of fits inside of the fork. The fork is supposed to hold it in place, and I'm not doing a very good job of doing this with one hand. Oh, that's because this should be sideways like that, and that's because this guy should be sideways, this guy should be up. There we go. See? This guy's in there. Good. So we just replaced the clutch fork and the release bearing. Okay, so we're going to be replacing the clutch next. Here's the disc, and the old disc is in here. It's wedged in between the flywheel and the pressure plate on the actual engine here. And the way that it gets released is through the pushing of the pedal, pushing the master cylinder. That pushes the slave cylinder, and that pushes the release fork that pivots on the other side, and it pushes on these little fingers here, and it relieves the stress of the spring-loaded tension that is created by the pressure plate onto the disc, and it disengages whenever the engine is spinning. Allows the engine to get into gear manually. So we're going to end up replacing this because this one's got more meat, and these are a wear item, and on a swapped car it's increasingly difficult to remove these types of things, so we're just going to replace it while we're in there. I did inspect already the surfaces of the pressure plate and the flywheel, and the surfaces look great, so there really is no need to replace either of those as well. So we're just going to be doing this, and I'm going to do it on a time lapse. So let's take a look at so let's take a look at the clutch pressure plates. You can see the difference here between the two. Let's see if I can get a good view here. That's actually not so bad. You can see the difference in thickness between the new one and the old one. It definitely didn't need to be replaced, but it was, original. Car's got 60,000 miles on it, so it was probably a good idea to replace it while we were in there. And this one's going to end up gripping really well, so let's put it back on. All right, so when you replace the clutch disc, there's some writing on the inside of here. You can see the writing around the inside. This one says Getriebeseite. I'm not very good with German, but I think that this means transmission side. So when you want to install these, you put it right back in there, transmission side. And we need a clutch alignment disc, a clutch alignment tool. So let's get that. Okay, so I don't have a clutch alignment tool specific for this car, but I do have one for the S85 that I made, and I plan to use it as well. But this guy should work because the outside diameter seems to fit just perfectly on here. And this is a hole here on the alignment tool, and there's an actual knob or a protruding end here, and that needs to go in this hole. I'm not going to drill this out. I am not going to modify this, but I can just butt it up against it and make sure that that it stays aligned. And I think that that should be just enough to get it to sit center. So now I'm backing every single one of them off just to make sure that there's no pressure being put on the clutch plate. And in moving this around, it can move up and down. There is a nub inside of there. I wonder. I've got an idea. So as you can see here, you got our floating clutch disc in here, right? I got to figure out how to get this thing centered. The outer diameter of this custom-made S85 clutch alignment tool is perfect diameter for the clutch. Right? So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to utilize the hole in here, which is a threaded M6 hole, and I'm going to utilize the little hole that's on the protrusion for the alignment. And I created this little thing, which screws into there, and then that ends up going into there and uses it to center it and align it. So that's what I'm going to end up doing. Yeah, it seems like it works. Gotta screw it in a little tighter. Now there are torque specs for these 6, okay? So I gotta look it up and I'll tell you what they are. All right, the torque for these 6 bolts, they're M8 by 1.25, and the torque specified is 25 foot-pounds. So I have my torque wrench set, and I'm going to use a star pattern to make sure that I torque them correctly. Now the clutch disc is complete. Alright guys, so we're going to stop right there. My name is Frank Macaluso from Garageaholic, and if you like the content of this video, please like, subscribe, tag your friends, and let me know what you think. I love the comments, always respond to them. Alright? Next video we'll get into the oil pan, we'll get into the turbos, we'll get into the front belt and the other engine fixes, and we'll start cleaning this engine up. And then we'll work on the engine bay, and then we'll paint it, then we'll start doing final assembly. Stay tuned.